we attach to this frantic dysregulation that feels like productivity. So part of the work I also do with people is detaching this idea of like frantic intensity, feeling like I'm going to scream. That means I'm doing enough, because it can be easier, but we don't allow it to, because then we feel lazy. We feel like, well, this day felt pretty nice. I must not have accomplished enough, because we always are all these belief systems too. But so that being said, yes, we kind of have to accept or see a glimmer of, oh, maybe it can be different. I think that has to come first. But I was just talking to someone today who is doing their PhD, their thesis, 2 years, wrote nothing. We worked together in 4 months. She's done. Like, that's how cool it is.
Hey everyone, I'm Megs, and you're listening to the Mindful Megs podcast, Organizing an ADHD Brain, where you will hear stories from me and others on how we organize both our brains and our lives while living with ADHD. We talk about how ADHD can be your superpower if you know how to harness it. I found out I had ADHD 2 years ago, and it was very difficult for me to find acceptance. Now that I know so much, I want to share what I know and help others understand that this diagnosis is not your downfall. It's a eureka moment where you can now understand how your brain operates and how to figure out how to thrive. You can expect to feel inspired, like you're not alone, and learn about so many of the incredible organizational tools there are to help your head stay on straight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome back to Organizing an ADHD Brain. I'm your host, Megs, and I am here with Jenna. I am so excited. She is an ADHD therapist and coach, and I found her on Instagram because her incredible videos resonated with me so much. So, Jenna, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about the work you do. Who is Jenna?
Yes, hello. I am someone who was diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood, I think as many people are these days. And when that happened, I went, oh, okay, yes, it's all making sense now. So it was a long journey to get here through life. I used to actually be a coach for intuitive eating and disordered eating, which I now know is so intertwined with ADHD and the way we think and how things can play out. So I actually coached around that for 7 years and repaired my own relationship with restriction and binge eating and disordered eating. And so that was a beautiful healing process. And then it's what I taught. And then when I got diagnosed with ADHD, well, I think why I see ADHD differently and why I teach in a kind of a little bit of a different way, that's usually the comment I get, is like, no one's talking about it in this way, is because I see the parallels of like disordered eating and a relationship with food is how kind of the same thing with our brain. Like, for instance, oh yeah, if you restrict, you're going to binge. Well, if you're in a frantic, intense state, you're going to crash. Like, it's just, humans are very predictable. So our brains are always on these, we're functioning from these cycles. So if we go too far one way, we're going to have an opposite reaction the other way. And so I have seen both with eating, like intuitive eating is very like allow all foods, find balance. Yes, you want to eat well, but you also need to allow some dessert or else you're going to binge. And so it's the same with functioning with ADHD, is we can't get too ramped up or else we're going to crash. So how do we find that balance and flow and way of living in this sustainable and enjoyable way? And I think where sometimes we've gotten tripped up, or I think just the mainstream messaging around ADHD isn't quite there yet, because I find the overall, not everybody, of course, but the overall energy is like, work harder, do these hacks, use these timers. Okay, set a timer and then work really hard for 15 minutes and then see how much you can get done and gamify it. And it's very like, I hate to say it, but it's very like masculine, like intense energy around ADHD and how to cope with it. Where my history has made me see that's like actually taking our foot off the gas pedal, slowing down a little bit, regulating. That's a lot of the work I do, working on our flexible thinking, and this like gentleness actually then lets the brain open up to be more productive. But we're kind of losing that message, and everyone's trying so hard, and it's just making it even harder.
It's funny because I was thinking about, as you said, 15 minutes. I tell a lot of my clients to try to break things up into 15-minute tasks, but
Mhm.
not in a go, go, go way, but
Yes,
just
yes.
to help us understand the time frame. But I love one video that I watched. You talked about giving up social media
Mhm.
and how annoyed you were at what a difference it was making in your life. It resonated with me so much because that is such a thing that I struggle with. And at the same time, I also know how incredible it can be. So
Mhm.
your words are beautiful, and the work that you're doing is really incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey on when you were diagnosed, what that was like, and how you got to the space that you're in now?
Sure. So it's after I had kids when I really felt it was more and more obvious. I'm like, okay, yeah, something's different. Like something is up here. Something is the word I had at the time was something's wrong. And as I researched, I'm like, I think it's ADHD, which seemed weird to me because I am a, high achieving, outwardly appearing, successful person. And that's not the messaging we hear about ADHD. I was always a calm girl, only child, goody goody. Like, what are you talking about? How could I have ADHD? I wasn't running around. I was never disruptive. I was always doing well in school. But now that I see how I actually did a lot of like strategies and coping subconsciously to do all of that. But after I had kids, that's when it really got to the point of like, okay, like this is different. I'm functioning differently than other people function. Why is this happening? So for about 2 years, I was like to my parents specifically, like, I think I have ADHD. And of course, they don't know what that looks like, especially in women. They're like, no, you're crazy. Like, no, you don't. You do so well in life. But then eventually I was actually in grad school to become a therapist. And as a parent of two at that point, I was like, okay, I am not doing well. I am struggling hard. So I really want to go get an assessment. So I was very privileged that my parents helped me pay for it because it was very expensive. Now I know kind of some more affordable options, and I got the yes, you have ADHD. And it was just like, thank God. So if it wasn't that, I know it's something. Something is going on. So that was really great. It was just a nice thing to know. Okay, I am not just individually weird. Like there's a reason for it. It's not a personal failing. I'm not just quirky. Like I think in a different way. And I always knew that, but now I just enjoyed having a solid thing to point at to understand why. And then as I was in grad school to become a therapist, I, of course, was like, well, ADHD is very relevant to me. So I want to learn and research and take courses and do as much as possible so I can work with people with ADHD because I'm a big fan of working with someone who experiences what you're going through. Similar to when I was working with disordered eating, I had that connection with my clients of I've been there and I know. So then I started researching and I also saw that nobody knows what to do with us. Every course I took was like timers, calendars. This is all you have to teach me to help people, but okay. So then I started working with people. And then after, hundreds of hours of working with ADHDers one-on-one, I started making the connection of how this cycle of being dysregulated in this frantic state and crashing is the core of our struggle. That if we're not dealing with that, timers, calendars, little doodads are not gonna, we're not gonna break through enough to make a lifelong difference. Those tools can be very valuable and useful, but it can't be everything. And so then that's how I developed kind of the framework I use now, which I don't know if it really has a name. I call it ADHD flow, but it's really focusing on regulation and balancing everything, our thinking, our schedules, our nervous systems, and kind of finding the sustainable and enjoyable way to live. It's a lot more sustainable, enjoyable, really. It's just like a way that you can live forever instead of feeling like you're always hanging by a thread or white knuckling it or always trying to play catch up. We can't do that forever. It's too tiring.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. How old are your kids, by the way?
4 and 5 boys, they are absolute terrors in the best of ways.
That's awesome. Mine are 5 and 7, and I have 2
Oh,
girls.
oh,
So,
I
a
feel like that's a
flip
different
side.
vibe.
It's totally totally different. I don't know that I would know what to do with boys, but likewise, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It was interesting because I never understood the correlation between eating disorders and ADHD
Mm,
until more recently,
hmm
and I've struggled with food my entire life.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I think it was 2 years ago now, I have to do, math in my head, but I had bariatric surgery and I
Mhm.
lost 120 pounds, and
Wow.
I thought that that was going to fix
Mm.
everything.
Yep.
I just thought I'm like, "Okay, well, once I lose weight, everything will be
Yeah.
fine." Except that there was so much work, and I was doing work, I was meeting with a therapist, but there was so much work that I still hadn't done up
Mm.
here
Yeah.
that I had to work through, and I'm still working through to this day. So, coming back to the self-regulation, what's one of the first pieces of advice you give to people with ADHD to work on their self-regulation?
Mhm.
So
Right.
curious.
Yes. Well, I typically work in groups now. So I mostly work in groups of 7 people. So it's more of a teaching kind of the concepts. But then, of course, I ask everybody, how does this relate to you? Do you connect with this? How do you see this play out in your own life? I've never had someone say, I do not relate to this. So it's inherent. It's part of all of us with ADHD, I think. But I always explain first what's happening. So I wish I could show the image right now, but I do have a flow image. Maybe we could put it in the notes or something where people could look at it.
Oh, definitely.
But there's like a little top layer where the ADHD brain, when left unattended, as I call it, lives in one of 2 places. So we have this little top layer at the very top of the page, and it has things like overwhelm, paralysis, frantic energy, rushing, masking. Now I've got to use my working memory here. What else is up there? Just all of that stuff that we experience that is very intense. It's like, oh my God, I have so much to do and I'm so overwhelmed. And how am I going to get all done? So you have that spot. It could also be internal, right? Though we can be in paralysis laying down for 3 hours and scrolling, but it's still that mental rumination and intensity and swirling. And then we can't sprint forever and then we crash. So then at the bottom, there's a little spot where it's low dopamine, exhaustion. It's just like, I can't even care anymore. Totally checked out and just that exhausted state, that kind of burnout. And then what the ADHD brain does, it loops around and around and around from one to the other. We ping pong in these extremes and it keeps going because, of course, then we are exhausted for a few days, don't get much done, finally have some energy. And then we feel like, oh, I got to do it all right now because what if I crash again? But it's like a self fulfilling prophecy. Of course, if we go in really hard and intense, we will crash again. It's the high that creates the low, whereas we're not making that connection and we're just seeing, oh, I crash or I'm lazy or so the second I feel any motivation to do anything, I have to go 125% at it. But then that intensity creates the crash. So here we go round and round. So even understanding that is a great first step. And then the second step would be even just identifying dysregulation in the moment. Can you tell when you're in that state? Because if you can't, how can we disrupt it at all? The physical signs would be, any physical signs of anxiety, heart racing, tense muscles, rushing. I love that one because it's very physical. You can see yourself doing it, right? Are you running around your house trying to get things done? Or are you walking at a reasonable pace and present with each task? Or are you running, oh my God, I got to do this now. I got to do this. Oh, I got to take the garbage out. If we're in that state, we are dysregulated. And then the mental part of it is rumination, overwhelm, negative self talk, masking. So, all of those things can also be dysregulation, doesn't always have to be physical. What I should say though is all of that is fight or flight. So, that dysregulation, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So, like flight, it's kind of like when we're running around. Fight, we can have emotional dysregulation, that comes up and we're short or we're snippy or angry. And then flight or freeze, obviously paralysis. And then fawn, which is that masking piece, that people pleasing piece, that, oh my gosh, if I make sure everyone else is okay and no one's mad at me, then I'll be all right. Because when we're in fight or flight, your body doesn't know if you have lots of emails to write and you have a long to-do list or if you're getting chased by a bear. So, of course, if you're functioning in a place where like you feel like you're in danger all the time, which you might not consciously think you're in danger, but your body is functioning in that way,
Right.
of course it's exhausting. It is so exhausting. So then you will crash and you will be exhausted and you will feel like you're just running on this treadmill trying to catch up all the time because then you crash. It's such a vicious cycle. So it's a great spot to start to be like, wow, in the moment, can I identify when I'm dysregulated? And the one thing I hear on like session 2 of our groups is like, Oh, I'm a lot more dysregulated than I thought. Like all day, every day, I'm just in this state of like heightened intensity and my brain's going a mile a minute. And that's the first place to start is like we have to see it to then work on it.
I like taking a step back first
Yeah.
and acknowledging that you need to acknowledge what's going on first before you accept the help or start doing any kind of work just
Mm,
based on listening to videos or doing this or that. Just acknowledge that you need something more than what's happening right now
mm,
and start absorbing what's happening. So I like that
mm,
that's the way you approach it because one thing I've noticed with people I talk to with ADHD or even just seeing videos or memes or things like that is that people might know that they have ADHD, but now they just think it's a thing that they have to deal with.
mm,
Or they're working against their brain almost 24/7
mm.
instead of finding ways to work with it
Yeah.
to identify that, okay, I literally will not remember this if I don't write it down. So I have to consciously tell myself, write this down,
Mm.
do this so that you can allow yourself to make peace with it's somewhere. I can
Yeah,
look up again.
exactly.
What kind of transformations have you seen with people acknowledging their dysregulation
Mm.
and just yeah, not just going with the status quo anymore? Like
Yes.
because you're kind of
Mm.
comfortable being there, right? Because it's just
Yeah.
what you know. It
Familiar.
sucks.
Yeah.
It's but it's familiar. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. That's a great point. I do get a lot of comments on my posts about like, well, that's just how I work. Well, I have to work frantically. Well, that's the only time I get anything done. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. I get it. I so get it. We are attached to this frantic dysregulation that feels like productivity. So, part of the work I also do with people is detaching this idea of like frantic intensity, feeling like I'm going to scream. That means I'm doing enough because it can be easier, but we don't allow it to because then we feel lazy. We feel like, well, this day felt pretty nice. I must not have accomplished enough because we always are all these belief systems too. But so that
Mhm.
being said, yes, we kind of have to accept or see a glimmer of, oh, maybe it can be different. I think that has to come first. But I was just talking to someone today who is doing their PhD, their thesis, 2 years, wrote nothing. We worked together in 4 months, she's done. Like that's how cool it is. And I'm not, there's no like accountability coaching where it's like, okay, get this many pages down. We didn't even talk about that. We just talked about how are you going to be regulated? Are you enjoying this process of writing? What is overwhelming for you? What is stopping you? What is getting in the way? And then we work on the overwhelm, we work on the regulation, we work on this whole concept of like life is meant to be enjoyed, not endured. Just because you're writing your PhD, your life has to be hell. No, are you enjoying the day to day process of this? And we do all that work. And now she's like, oh, and now I'm doing my 3 week study to defend it
Oh,
because I'm done. I've handed it in. I'm like, that's crazy.
yes. I oh, that's so amazing because I don't know if this is everyone or with ADHD, but oftentimes I find myself just constantly thinking about what's next, what's next, what's next.
Yeah.
And especially when I worked in the corporate world, I was like, "Oh, I will be happy once I do this
Oh my
or
gosh.
once I
Yeah.
do this." And through a lot of yoga and mindfulness and manifestation practices, I've found myself practicing focusing on the present. And I say
Mhm.
practicing because I'm not always good at it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
like literally taking myself out of that future and saying,
Yeah.
wow, what is really good in this moment? And how can I be present for that?
Hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
do any work with that too?
Well, regulation is being present, right? Regulation to me,
Mm.
being regulated is I am here present in the thing I am currently doing and everything's fine. Like I'm inherently safe. Everything's okay. Got laundry to do? That's okay. It doesn't distract me from talking to you on this podcast because I'm here. That's for
Mm.
later. It's this idea of being able to be present and not in this like hypervigilant state. Oh my God, I have this to do, I have this to do, and later I have to do this, and then I gotta go do that. And then, oh my gosh, how am I gonna pick up my kids at 4? And I'm just here. And that's what a regulated brain can do is it can be present with the task at hand and enjoy the process instead of being so hyper focused on like, okay, what's next? What's next? And we're not enjoying any of it. And this energy of like trying to get anything over with to me is a huge red flag of dysregulation. I've been doing this for a while. So I'm at the point where I'm at the dentist and I'm laying down and I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to get out of here. And I'm like, nope, be present. Like
Yeah.
this rushing to get things over with dysregulates us so bad. It brings all the anxiety up. Okay, now I'm in this frantic state of trying to get things over with. And oh my God, you're going to crash. So it's like, how can I just be present when I'm washing the dishes? Just be here. We're not trying to get over with. This is part of life. This is in itself just important as a moment as you going on vacation. It's all to be experienced and enjoyed as much as possible. But that's very different messaging than typical ADHD work, which is just like productivity. How can we get more done? Hammer it out. That's going to close the ADHD brain down even more. The brain's like, no, thank you. Like, that sounds boring and hard. Whereas if we start creating a life that's like, wow, I'm just present for each moment. Oh, I'm waking up, I'm having my coffee. Okay, now I'm doing this. Oh my gosh, the brain's like, okay, I'm open to that. That sounds fine.
Yeah.
I'll go make a coffee. That sounds fun. Instead of like, well, after I make my coffee, then I have to do this and I have to do that. So I'm just going to lay in bed instead. And that's some other feedback I've had recently is one client in a group was saying, oh, I'm happy to wake up in the morning because I have like a slower morning that's not just torturous the whole day. I'm not dreading the day. So I'm
Yeah.
more able to wake up when my alarm goes off. So people will ask me like, how do I wake up earlier in the morning? I'm like, I know you want some sort of like alarm hack, but if you get regulated and start enjoying your life more, you'll want to wake up more. The
Yeah.
overwhelm and the stress of life has us making it hard to wake up, not necessarily like we need more sleep. Sometimes we do because ADHDers do need more sleep than others,
Mhm.
but it's very like rooted in dysregulation.
It's funny that you say that because when I was a kid and younger, I would procrastinate getting up. And it wasn't as if I was sleeping. I would wake up and I'd be like, not yet. And I would, force myself to just close my eyes again. And now I wake up at 5 a.m. And if I don't feel like I have the best day because getting up at 5 a.m. allows me to do it slowly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what you say is culturally
Mm.
significant because we have a hustle culture that we're living
Mm-hmm.
in.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons why I left the corporate world is because I knew that the more that I would grow, the more I'd have to work and put myself out
Right.
there or even feel like I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And so now taking a step back, working on my own business, I am working so hard on figuring out how do I have a balance where I'm working and I'm doing something that I feel that is purposeful in my life, but I can also be present with my children.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a shift happening and it's not as fast as I would like it to be happening, but I do feel like more and more people are looking to see like what are these life hacks that we can have that just make life more purposeful and
Mm-hmm.
worth living the best life out there where
Yeah.
we're thriving and not just working every day
Mm-hmm.
and having 2 days off. My daughter says, "I just feel like it's so unfair that we have to go to school 5 days a week and then we only get 2 days off." And I'm like, "Girl, preach. I get
Yeah,
it.
totally.
Absolutely."
Yes, but even in that, okay, so say you have a 9 to 5, that's you can't afford to not. You have to have your 9 to 5.
Absolutely.
If you are regulated, prioritizing enjoyment, slowing down, I highly recommend people look at their work contract. What are your hours contracted for? Because ADHDers work so many extra hours feeling like we're inadequate and we have to make up for it. They're not taking lunch breaks. But then your brain's going to take a break anyway, and you're going to be scrolling for an hour and a half where you could have just taken your lunch hour. So there's a lot we can do in whatever your current situation is. You don't have to quit your job and become an entrepreneur. You don't have to do any of that because that can be way worse. I was a coach for 7 years prior to this work I'm doing, and that was while I was dysregulated and not diagnosed. And I definitely brought that into my life 24/7. So that's not
Yeah.
necessarily the answer. But if you are a regulated worker, oh my God, like you'll be fine. It's just simply being present with each task at hand, not allowing yourself to be a frantic person that's like a chicken running around with their head cut off. Because yes, your coworkers might be that, but is that helping anything? No. I have seen as a regulated person in the past couple of years of business, I have been more successful working slowly and more thoughtfully and mindfully and less, honestly, than I ever was when I was like running around absolute wild, thinking about work morning to night, frantic, rushing. And my success was like up, down, up, down, up, down, 6 months of nothing, up, down, up, down. Now it's like
Yeah.
every month is more successful than the last. But I'm slower. It's so counterintuitive, but that is how the ADHD brain, we kind of get off the rails when we're dysregulated. We're not able to make as thoughtful decisions. We're not able to prioritize because when we are in fight or flight, the prefrontal cortex is turned off. That's decision making. That's logical thinking. That's prioritizing. That's discerning what's good, better, best. That's long-term planning. All of that gets shut off when we're rushing and frantic. Yet we think when we're rushing and frantic, we're more productive. No, we're actually just spending a lot of time on things that need no attention. We're just reacting. Oh, an email popped up. Let me do that. Maybe that email is of no importance. You need to be doing your other work. But when we're dysregulated, we just react to what's in front of us. There's very little thoughtfulness. We're not able to stay on task, easily distracted, and we procrastinate. It's a whole mess. Regulation is so cool. I just love it because I still have ADHD. I still have a calendar of like insanity in detail because I need that. There's still supports I need, but the supports I need are so like drop in the ocean at this point. It's like, who cares? That doesn't hinder me at all. And then
Yeah.
when we're regulated, that's also when the superpowers of ADHD come out. Because I know people talk about superpowers and people are like, well, I don't have any. I just struggle. It's like, probably because you're dysregulated. There's no space for that sparkle that we do have to get utilized and really show itself. Because at this point, I see ADHD as it's only brought me good, especially currently as a regulated ADHDer. The where it comes out is only positive.
That was part one of a two-part interview I did with Jenna. It was so incredible to hear her insights and her understanding of ADHD through regulation. I can't wait to share a little bit more about how this episode impacted me and my day-to-day life. I had one of the best days yesterday after focusing on being present and really enjoying the moments that I had instead of focusing on what's next. In this episode, I think I even felt like, oh, I'm regulated. There's not a lot that I need to do. And then when I started practicing some of the things we talked about, felt like it was a little bit different. So interesting. Stop back here on Wednesday. I'm going to drop the second part of our interview. All of the different information that Jenna was talking about in the interview is in the show notes below. And let me know if you have any additional questions. Have an awesome day. Oh, I did this new feature on the podcast platform that I use where you can actually send me a text message. So if you scroll down to the show notes, you can click a little button and it'll send me a text. Share your thoughts. It's so easy because there's a button for it. So cool. I mean, there's other ways to get in touch with me in the show notes too, but try it out. I'm so curious how it works. And I would love to post a text message that I get. So you guys are amazing. Thank you for all of your feedback. I have been hearing some beautiful, beautiful things about the podcast. So thank you. It keeps me going. If you would like to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, please consider joining my Patreon account where I'll post some additional content and some wise words from me, if you will. Join my Facebook page, like and share this podcast with whomever you think could benefit. I also have this amazing woman who is my friend. She owns a small batch skincare business in Colorado, and I have been using her CBD bath bombs forever. And I have a code that you can use to save 10%. If you use that code, you can order bath bombs for yourself and have it sent to you. I actually just had my father order the direct pain cream, and it is incredible. I use it for cramps, and he used it for his knee that was giving him a ton of pain. And he looked at me after he put it on. First, I had to promise him he's not going to get high, right? And he laughed at me, but also I think he was relieved that I confirmed that for him. But he looked at me and he was like, I can't believe this is working right now. He's taken aspirin, he's taking all of these other things to try to get the pain to diminish in any way. And this direct pain cream works. So check it out. Use my code to save money and you can have it shipped to you. So it doesn't matter where you are. Additionally, me and my husband use HelloFresh. I'm not sponsored by them in any way. So these are literally just free boxes that we can give away. So I put a code down in the show notes below.
If you sign up for a free box, then we get to feed our family for a week for free. So thank you so much for supporting us. And you get to eat as well. So how about that? What a world we get to live in. If nothing else, just thank you for participating and listening.